build the future, we should think big. Go above and beyond to discover new perspectives. We need to raise our standards to the next level and support those who are as passionate as us about creating the future. Today, we are changing our world so you can see its beauty tomorrow. Together, we move beyond with QNB.
In today's rapidly evolving world, innovation is paving the way towards growth and sustainability. Ranging from energy and resource sustainability to healthcare and education, innovation has the power to enhance all aspects of our society. Qatar is taking great strides becoming a hub for innovation with an ecosystem that supports every step from testing to scaling globally. By fostering tech-based industries and cutting-edge research, Qatar will become an international hub for innovation and development. Qatar Economic Forum's Innovation Day, in partnership with Qatar Research, Development and Innovation Council, brings together thought leaders from across the globe. From equitable distribution to ethical implications, our discussions transcend borders, shaping a future that's inclusive and sustainable. We welcome you to be a part of this conversation and join us on Thursday, May 16th for the Qatar Economic Forum Innovation Day, sponsored by Qatar Research, Development and Innovation Council.
Welcome to the fourth edition of the Qatar Economic Forum, powered by Bloomberg.
Now is the moment to capitalize on all what's been built and what's really at the center of this strategy, unleashing their potential, opening up opportunities for the private sector.
It's a region that is actually a bright spot amongst very few in the world today. And people always talk about the flavor of the month. Actually, we will be the flavor of decades.
I think our leaderships see eye to eye on the most important issues.
Can I ask all of you, is this a good time actually to invest?
So we're in the business of buying things and selling them. So it's always a good time to be buying and selling.
I think it's a really amazing opportunity to invest in private credit in Asia.
I think technology is going to be the place I'd go for a long-term investment.
We need to see political stability in the regions, in different regions, to see more growth in the economies.
And at times there are both challenges and opportunity, and I think we're in one of those times at the moment.
What is the catalyst for an American debt crisis going to be? So I don't know what that moment will be when there's an auction that goes awry. Financial markets, generally speaking, work very well until they catastrophically come off the rails.
What's the biggest challenge for you?
I think what we need to do, right, other than focusing on the economy and development, is to bring back some humanity, compassion, and human dignity.
Please welcome to the stage Bloomberg's Jumana Bersetchi.
Esteemed guests, welcome back to the second day of the Qatar Economic Forum powered by Bloomberg. Now, مرحبا وصباح الخير عن جديد.
Good morning once again. Welcome to Qatar Economic Forum.
Line up ahead, a deep dive into the critical global issue of energy security, a case study of how to better connect the Middle East and Africa, and we examine the role of sports, media, and entertainment in the Arab world. We cover these topics and so much more across Bloomberg.com, and we are offering a complimentary 3-month corporate subscription for you and your team today. So you can scan the QR code on the screen to learn more. And while you're doing that, I'd like to thank our official partners, the Ministry of Commerce and Industry of the State of Qatar and Media City Qatar, our innovation sponsor QRDI, and our premier sponsors, the Qatar Investment Authority and QNB. Thank you to all of our other sponsors for making this forum possible. We are going to start now. والآن سنبدأ البرنامج.
Welcome to the stage, His Excellency Prabowo Subianto, Minister of Defense and President-elect of the Republic of Indonesia, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Haslinda Amin.
Good morning. Indonesia is on the cusp of a new president. Prabowo Subianto is a four-star general turned politician. He says he's more than ready to lead. This is a country of 280 million people with an ambition of being the fifth largest economy in 2045. President-elect Prabowo Subianto, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
You campaigned on the promise of continuity. Give us a sense of what policies will be a priority in your first 2 years of government?
Yes, as you know, nation building is a long-term process, and President Joko Widodo has built a strong foundation, and I'm determined to build on that foundation. And my core focus will be first on food security. Indonesia must be self-sufficient in food, and then energy security, energy self-sufficiency, and we are determined to bring down poverty in a massive campaign, massive effort. I'm determined to get rid of hunger amongst our people, especially the young. And in the end, we have to concentrate on processing our natural resources. We have to make a great effort in downstreaming and to industrialize. And all of this needs good governance. I'm determined to cut down corruption, waste, and with that, we are very confident, we are very bullish, we are very determined to bring this all about.
All very ambitious if you want to do it within your first term, which is 5 years. Can you achieve a growth target of beyond 5% in order for you to fulfill what you have set out to do? In my conversation with Bapa Joko Widodo, he said that he's laid the foundation, he's implemented all the policies, put in place infrastructure needed for Indonesia to grow at 7%. Can you achieve 7% or more in the 5 years of government?
I'm very confident. I've talked to my experts, I've studied the figures. I'm very confident we can easily achieve 8%. And I am determined to go beyond.
8% within the 5 years, the first year, second year, and when you go beyond, are you looking at double-digit growth?
I would say within 2-3 years, yes.
You talked about downstreaming. What are the other growth drivers for you? Or would downstreaming be key to you achieving 7, 8, 9% growth?
Downstreaming will take several years. What will be a growth driver in the first years will be our concentration on agriculture, food production, food distribution, and energy. We want to go green in a very quick way. We want to produce our diesel from palm oil, and this will be a very strong growth driver. You know, we import $20 billion every year for diesel oil. So can you imagine the savings we will have when we will switch to biofuel?
Indonesia has often said it is open for business. Yet, I think a lot of investors say it's adopted protectionist policies, limits on the export of nickel, coal, palm oil. Is it important for you to move away from nationalistic protectionist policies?
No, I think there's a misperception. We are not protectionist. What we are doing is very logical. Every country in the world will fight or will protect the national core interest of their people. And we think that we want to industrialize, and those are our natural resources. We have to protect our interest in the sense that we must get the full value, right? We cannot keep importing industrial goods all the time. It's not fair to our people. We will not be an advanced industrial society if we are just a producer of raw materials.
I want to touch on your spending plans. When you campaigned, you talked about how you want to provide free lunches, free milk for students, and some are questioning how you will pay for such a program. Can you fund that program if you're unable to perhaps raise the limit of your budget deficit beyond 3%? You've said you can.
We have studied this. We have, what do you call it? We studied all the figures, and we are very confident we can do that. We are very confident we can do that. And
while keeping your budget deficit at 3%?
Yes, 3%. And you know, the 3% is something arbitrary. Not many countries hold to that. But we have a tradition of prudent fiscal management. I think we have the lowest debt to GDP figure in the world, one of the lowest. And so now I think it's time to be a bit more daring within good governance. So
what does that mean? Raising the limit beyond 3? Would 4, 5% still be comfortable, prudent?
We calculate that it's a matter of refocusing and cutting down the waste, cutting down the allocation to non-essential activities. So it's a matter of efficient, good governance, good administration, good management. And we are going to introduce, and we are in the midst of introducing e-governance. All Indonesian government institution procurement will go through an e-catalog. We will go digitalization, computerization, and this will increase our tax ratio, our revenue services. We will revamp, and yeah, we are very determined to cut down waste. We calculate that we can save a lot of money by cutting down waste, and this will be the growth factor. This will be the growth driver. So we are very confident.
What's also ambitious in moving your capital from Jakarta to Nusantara, a project that will cost you $35 billion. Why is it a worthy cause? Why is it important for you to move the capital?
The idea of moving the capital has been around since the first years of our independence. Our first president, President Sukarno broached this idea. First, the idea was to put our capital in a more central location. Number two, Jakarta, its surroundings, and Java is very, very highly populated. So the ecological burden of Jakarta is tremendous. We are facing a rise in the ocean. It's around between 5 to 10 centimeters a year. And so we have to build a giant seawall. That's one of my programs also. But moving the capital is one way to bring growth outside Jakarta, outside Java, and also in the next few years, before the giant seawall can be completed, which will take maybe 10, 15 years, our capital is safe from inundation.
Is funding an issue? Because there's been problems in getting foreign funds into the Nusantara project. Will you be reliant on domestic players, the government, to fund this $35 billion project?
Yes, $35 billion, but the calculation is we will need 25 years to 30 years to complete this capital. So if you say $30 billion over 30 years, that's $1 billion a year. Indonesia's economy, Indonesia's budget can carry that. So we are very confident. I mean, I believe capital city is a political project, and the main drivers must be the domestic resources, and then the foreign investment will come in later.
Bapak Prabowo, you were a general.
I was a general. I'm retired.
You were a general, and you were with the army for 20 years. You were also
28 years, yes.
28 years. It's a long time. Some people perhaps feel like your policies will be viewed through military eyes. How do you respond to that?
I've been out of the military for what? Maybe more than 25 years. So I think it's just, it's a, what do you call it? It's a non sequitur. It doesn't relate to any.
What kind of leadership style do you think you'll adopt as a president?
I will be myself. I will be genuine.
What does that mean?
That means that you are true to your principles, your values, your ideals. And as a patriot, my main value is the well-being of my people. The well-being of my people. My people must be safe. My people must not be hungry. My people must have a good life. That is the dream of every patriot, of every country in the world.
Some people are concerned. Your critics are concerned. You may clamp down on democracy. What do you say to them?
Who is concerned?
There's some critics who say you may clamp down on democracy.
Who is concerned?
So you're saying there is no concern about that?
Why don't you ask the Indonesian people? I go to elections already 4 times. I go to my people. I ask their consent. 3 times they did not give their consent. This time they give the consent. Where is the concern about democracy? The concern about democracy is, I think, made up by some people in the press.
So that would be us then.
Each country has their own culture, history. Every leader of every country must serve their own people in their own way. So I said, I go to my people. They rejected me 3 times. They accepted me this time. So I will work very hard so that I don't disappoint my people. Right? What do we live for? We live for the legacy we want to leave behind, is a good reputation, a good name in the history of our country.
Just to wrap up, because we're running out of time, as you said, you attempted to be president several times, and this time you succeeded. Why is it important for you to lead Indonesia? Why is it important for you to be the president of this country?
Basically, it is the desire to serve, the people. I grew up in many countries, and I saw my people, many of them are very poor. In my heart, I cannot accept that in this day and age, Indonesia, member of the G20, Indonesia, the fourth largest population in the world, many of my people are still living a very, very difficult life. And that is what drives me. I want to do my bit. I want to make my contribution with my insights, with my experience, with my leadership. I believe I can contribute a lot to bettering the life of my people.
President-elect Prabowo Subianto, we thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to the stage His Excellency Saad Sharida Al-Kaabi, Minister of State for Energy Affairs, State of Qatar, and President and CEO of Qatar Energy, Patrick Pouyanné, Chairman and CEO of Total Energies, and Darren W. Woods, Chairman and CEO of ExxonMobil, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Francine Lacroix.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. There's, of course, a lot of talk about transition. We need to talk about supply and demand. And if you look at the world, it's using more oil, actually, than ever. Demand is outpacing expectations again this year, really raising questions about when we'll see peak consumption. So, Minister, let me start off with you. Can you give us some of what you see in terms of supply and demand for oil and gas in the next couple of years?
Well, thank you for inviting us all to be here. You know, the main thing that drives demand is economic growth and people growth. So if you look at the expectation of having 1.5 billion to 2 billion people on this earth joining us all here in the next 30 years or so, it means that you're going to need more energy, whether it's for power, you're going to need more petrochemicals for everything that we're using daily in plastics and everything that's related to the petrochemical products that we use every day. So the growth is going to be there, the demand is going to be there. When people talk about transition and having renewable energy, I think renewable energy is going to play a big role with additional solar, additional wind. But because of the intermittency, you're going to need, a backup to have a sustainable power all day long when the sun is not shining or when the wind is not blowing. So the requirement for power from fossil fuels is going to be there, and is going to be there for a very long time. And you need to also realize that 1 billion people today don't have basic power that we all enjoy. So we need to also be fair to that population and make sure they have access to reasonably priced power.
We'll talk a little bit then about what's the right way of seeing the transition. But Patrick Pouyanné, I mean, TotalEnergies is doing a lot of expanding in LNG products. I'm thinking of Mozambique, I'm thinking of Rio Grande, Papua New Guinea. How do you see the LNG market landscape? Is there a danger that we're in surplus, actually, at the end of the decade or in 15 years?
Today, no. Today, you see, even because of the European market becoming an LNG market after the Russian-Ukrainian war, you see that we are in a tense market where, in fact, supplies is even short demand. So tomorrow, we have more projects coming on stream. It's true. You don't forget Qatar, by the way, in my portfolio, maybe because you wanted me to say that we are together with Qatar in all the projects. Fundamentally, we believe gas is part of the transition. Gas is the best way to make flexible power to complement the intermittency of renewables. Gas is a way to get out of some coal, so replacing. So it's good transition. So there is a market there for gas, for LNG. Of course, it's a commodity, so you don't never match supply and demand. So probably we'll have, by 27, 2030, quite a lot of supply. But you know, when there's quite a lot of supply, what is good is when the price is going down, so it attracts new customers. Countries like India, for example, are really looking to building infrastructure for using gas, city gas, distributing gas. So I think it will be a good, after having a peak, which afraid the customers, we will have maybe a softer price, and then it will attract customers, and then we'll regulate it. So I'm not afraid. I think there is a clear place for the gas in the transition. It's a fossil, but again, it's emit less than others. So let's think to that. And again, like His Excellency said perfectly, we have entered into the electricity business. I can tell you, all my customers in electricity, they want 24/7 electricity. And if I'm giving them only renewables and green, it doesn't work. So I have to match gas plants, gas-fired power plants, and renewables. And this model, we deploy it, for example, in Texas, and it's quite profitable to do it.
Darren Woods, I mean, your take on this? Again, there's a rise in electric vehicles, there's a rise in renewable energy, but consumption will continue rising for energy in general. So how do you see this playing out in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I think I'd agree with what both Patrick and His Excellency, the points they've made, that ultimately the demand for energy is being driven by economic growth and people's living standards rising. And there are billions of people around the planet who deserve better lives and are going to require affordable, available, and reliable energy sources. And I think that's the challenge going forward while we continue to see demand. EVs, wind, and solar all play a role, but they also have their limitations. And so I think the challenge for the world going forward is to meet that demand, to meet that criteria, affordable, available, and reliable power, in a way that does it with less emissions. And there's the electron solutions that everyone's been focused on for quite some time. There's also the molecule solutions. Part of it is natural gas and having lower emissions through combustion of natural gas, but it also is with converting natural gas to methane, to hydrogen, and then burning hydrogen with less emissions. It's biofuels, it's capturing the carbon. There's a number of solution sets to address the broader problem statement, which is emissions, while you continue to power economic growth and people's prosperities. As we talk about it in our company, it's an and equation. You don't have to choose between one or the other. The world can do both.
And I want to ask all of you where you think we are in the cycle of the transition. But Minister, Qatar announced plans to expand production capacity to 142 million tons a year by 2030 earlier this year. Do you think you'll expand even further?
Well, when we announced that we were going to expand further, I mean, in the past, we had announced 77 million tons going up to 126 million tons. And we said that we are appraising the field further, and based on technical results of the field and the capability of the field long-term to sustain its production for other projects that we have, we'll assess whether we can do more. And After further appraisal, we found that we can do an additional 16 million tons and going to 142 million tons. And as mentioned by my colleagues, there is going to be need for gas in the future. And if you look at what Qatar is involved with our partners, and in most of the projects, the two gentlemen are with us in partnership, we're going from 77 to 142 in Qatar, and if you count what ExxonMobil and us are doing in Texas, that's an additional 18 million tons. We're more than doubling the Qatar capacity, if you will, or Qatar Energy's involvement in capacity over the next few years. So we think there is a big demand in the future, and we're going to expand to meet that demand. But I think technical capability of doing more in Qatar is going to be assessed in the future, and if there is more, we probably will do more. But also, we're a big explorer around the world, one of the largest holder of exploration blocks in the world, and some with my colleagues here. And if we find gas or oil, we would increase the capacity. We think we're very bullish on the demand going forward. And as mentioned, there is going to be a glut, if you will, of a lot of projects coming, mainly from Qatar and our project in Golden Pass, and some from my colleagues here in Mozambique and other areas. And there is going to be additional demand, but I think if economic growth, everybody is trying to get the inflation down and so on. If we have a reasonable economic growth going forward, I think you'll see that all the supply and demand will catch up, and you'll need another phase of development of gas in the 2030 plus. I don't think gas is going away anytime soon, and as evident by what the G7 said, just a year and a half ago or so, that we need more LNG. In the past, they were saying no more gas, no more fossil fuel. Now they're saying that we need more LNG, and a lot of countries are taking a 180-degree turn. Even the EV discussion that people were talking about, you see a lot of people backing off a little bit, I think.
But can I ask you an update on the North Field East? So when are you expecting the first shipment to happen? And do you have any longer-term agreements on that?
North Field East and South are on track. We're in the construction as we speak. All the construction is going very well. The second question was additional sales?
Longer-term agreements, actually.
I think one thing I want to mention is last year in this conference, I was asked by you whether we're going to have difficulty selling additional LNG, if you recall. And one of your nice Bloomberg editors actually came out that same night saying that Qatar is going to have a difficulty selling LNG. I just want to report back to you that since then, we've actually secured 25 million tons of long-term LNG sales. And I can tell you also on this podium that we're signing more this year.
See, it's great to have a yearly update.
Our marketing team is doing a great job.
We should do it, bi-yearly to have every 6 months update.
I don't think there's a problem of selling LNG. Everybody that's buying LNG is stopping in Qatar, and with my colleagues with other projects. I think it's just agreeing on terms and conditions and pricing. That's always the sticking point to finalizing things. But I think there's a huge demand out there, whether it's from Asia or Europe. And I think even Europe is realizing now they have to do something different to secure long-term. They've been very lucky with 2 warm winters.
So, Patrick, how should we look at the global energy transition? Is it taking a back step? Is it parallel? What did we misunderstand 2-3 years ago about how this would develop?
In fact, the word which is important is transition. The things will not happen in a night, like some people are dreaming, because again, some fundamentals is that population is growing, energy demand is growing. And in fact, when you look to what happened, for example, last year, it's true that we invest more and more and more in decarbonized energies, renewables, biofuels, etc. But last year, because the increase of demand on a single year, it covered these additional decarbonized products, only covered 40% of the additional demand in a year. So we are yet to cover with what is energy of today. And so, as I like the expression of Darren, the end equation, we are in the real world today. It's our energy, fossil fuels. We need to continue to produce and never forget that there is a natural decline, not in Qatar, but in many oil fields, you know. There it's growing, it's a natural growth, but it's quite an exception, a natural decline. And so on one side, we have to maintain the existing system, what I call the system A, and of course we have to build and invest more and more in the system B. But we are not yet at a pace to cover the additional yearly demand. So when people tell us we'll have to just keep on one side, no. So the transition is happening, it's serious. You know, last year we built in the world 550 gigawatts of renewables, but it's still not enough. So it is happening. Innovation is coming, but the EV deployment will take place by 2035, 2040. You know, in not every place. You know, you had just before us the president of Indonesia. You could ask him. For them, the priority is to get people out of poverty. That's the reality. It was his speech. So we need to face that reality. So the transition cannot go at the same pace everywhere in the world. And it was one of the pragmatism statements of COP28. It cannot be every pace everywhere in the world, emerging countries, developed countries. And the developed countries should not impose their views to everybody. And if you say that, yes, it's happening, but it will be gradual, slow, and I would say gradual. Even in our countries, developed countries, because there is a point which is fundamental. It's the affordability of energy. It's so important for the lives of the people. You can see the French, the German farmers, they were angry because we want to increase their price of diesel for their tractors. So we have to keep that in mind. So it's fine-tuning the balance between more sustainability for sure because of climate, but also keeping the affordability and reliability. And that's the equation, which is not an easy one. And I can tell you, I think we are doing our best. We are not, all of us are engaged in a way in different parts of this transition, the molecules, the electrons. It's not a matter, it's different views, and we need all of that. In fact, we need all energies. And so, yes, it will take time, but it does not mean that we not progress. We progress. And then the society, in fact, fundamentally, society means the demand patterns will dictate the pace of the transition. There is a wrong idea that the supply will dictate it. No, that's not, it does not happen like that. Of course, we need to supply, but the society will tell us. And society is also the car manufacturers. You know, there was a big enthusiasm for EV, and suddenly, 2-3 years after, no, today they tell us maybe the customers are a little reluctant to pay 10,000 euro more for a car. Of course they are more reluctant. So that's the pace of it, and that's what transition is clear.
Of course, but there's a lot of tension, Darren, right? Because if we're going to hit the targets, then the transition needs to be sped up. So are we slowing it down again, or is it just a perception?
Well, I think what's happening is we're starting to bring realism into the discussion. I mean, I think understanding the global energy system, the scale of that system, the important role that it plays in everybody's life around the world, and then thinking something that's been built over 150 years, trillions and trillions of dollars of investments that's playing such a critical role in the economies around the world, how you transition out of that system. And I would say transition from a higher carbon emission system to a lower carbon emission system. We started out with a very narrow solution set focused on wind and solar and EVs, and assumed or aspired that that would address the total set of the issues, and it doesn't. We need to be more realistic around, to Patrick's point, there are a lot of solutions that are going to be required. We should stay focused on the problem statement, which is emissions, and reducing those emissions, and less focused on exactly how to achieve that, and let every company, every sector, all technologies compete for the most cost-efficient way to reduce those emissions, and we will make progress much faster, which will mean making today's system more emissions efficient, while we introduce new systems that have lower emissions. And then with time, you will transition and we'll make progress. I think we've made a big mistake, one, by narrowing the solution set too soon. And we haven't been serious because we've taken out the companies who actually have the best understanding of the system, and frankly, a lot of the capabilities required to transition the system. And so I think a more realistic approach, one that opens the aperture on solution sets, and then one that engages the industries that have the capabilities to contribute effectively.
Minister, do you worry about the LNG market being oversupplied this decade? How quickly could that happen?
I think being over, so if I can just add to what my colleagues were saying on the transition, I think the promises were made, the majority of the promises were made by officials that are politicians, that really don't understand the details of how you can achieve these transitions. And it was driven to a point where it became in vogue, if you will, for everybody to say net zero and environmental and green, and that's what got you elected. And now when reality came in to actually implement the plans that they were talking about in COP26, let's say, okay, you know, 5-6 years later, they're saying we can't achieve what we're talking about. So reality kicks in, and now you're saying that, do you actually back off some of the targets? I think the targets were overstretched targets that you can't reach anyway. So anyway, on LNG supply, I think that there is going to be a need for LNG for a very long time. The European market seems from officials that you are discussing. I was with Kadri Simpson, with Her Excellency Kadri Simpson, basically the energy secretary or minister of EU, with Darren Woods in Saudi Arabia just a couple of weeks ago on a panel. And the discussion was that they feel they're very comfortable in Europe. And the comfort that they get in Europe is because they had two very warm winters, and they filled up all the storages, and they didn't need to use much of it. So if you have too harsh winters or normal winters, you're going to be depleting. So I think Europe is going to need a lot more LNG, and the world will need much more LNG with the growth, and I don't see an oversupply.
You talked about the frustration of some politicians. I think Patrick Pouyanné is looking at possibly listing in the US. I don't know whether that's frustration with politicians or frustration with the investor base that maybe don't fully understand what you're trying to do. But will you move your listing to the US?
Look, it's quite easy. There is no emotion. It's a question of business. What we observe is that we have more and more US shareholders. Today, we can only offer them ADR, and we want to offer them shares. That's all, because we have more and more US shareholders, and we have less European shareholders, including French shareholders, probably because of all the debate about ESG, etc. That's the reality. And then you see quite a difference of valuation between the US markets and the European market. So it's a fiduciary duty for the board of TotalEnergies to study. So I said we'll study, and then when we have studied, we will come back. And again, it's not a matter of politics, it's a matter of business. And I'm happy to see that all the French politicians want to keep TotalEnergies. By the way, we never said we will leave France. I repeat, we'll stay in France, we'll be listed in France. The question is, can we offer some shares to our US shareholders? That's technical and no matter of emotion. What is more important is the gas, to be honest, than New York, just to tell you the truth.
I mean, the listing is quite important.
No, it's not so important. Because again, the company is in good shape. We are very happy. We have a growth. We are, I could say in front of Darren, the most profitable major last year. So it's, sorry for that. But even investing in renewables. So we have a clear strategy. The strategy will not shift, which is more fundamental to me. Yeah. There is a clear strategy. We are consistent. We will deliver. It's gas. It's electricity. It's oil. That's part of its energies, TotalEnergies. And that's more important to me.
Our editor-in-chief also spoke to President Macron on Monday, who said he wouldn't be happy if you left France. But Darren, would you welcome more listings, even of European-based companies in the US?
Yeah, I think there's a more fundamental issue here, which is the approach that policymakers and politicians around the world are taking to drive the outcomes that they're looking for and the policies they're putting in place to achieve those outcomes. If you look at what's happening in Europe, our perspective, because we have quite a large business in Europe, is the policy being put in place is very prescriptive and very focused on how to achieve an outcome. So you're relying on politicians and policymakers to His Excellency's point, that don't have a true understanding of how things actually get done within certain industries to prescribe how to then conduct business. That puts a huge burden on the businesses. It makes them very uncompetitive. And on a global market, particularly in the industry that we're engaged in, it is global. Markets are liquid all around the world. And in order to compete, you need to have bring as much to bear in that competition as possible. The U.S., if you take what they're doing in policy making, particularly around climate with the IRA, it's more focused on the outcomes and looking at carbon intensity and encouraging businesses to find ways to meet those outcomes and keeping, at this point, the aperture open around how best to achieve that. That engages the technology firms, that engages the market forces, that engages the companies to find the best solution at the lowest cost to achieve the outcome. That's a much better competitive environment to operate in. I think that's one of the big challenges between the U.S. and Europe, quite frankly.
You look, it works, what Darren said. Look on the methane. When we speak about natural gas, the counter-argument is methane. Since in Glasgow we discovered there is a lot of a question of methane, the industry has taken that seriously, and we are all engaged in clear roadmaps, and we target through net zero methane by 2030 and in Permian, and we have the solution. So if the objective is set, you need to reduce the emissions, even to really drive down the emissions. We are able to do it. We take the challenge and we find a solution. So I think this is a way to interact between the policymaker and our companies. Let's trust each other. Let's not try to regulate. In fact, what is wrong today is to think the transition can only go through regulation. No, it could go also by innovation, trust, and working together.
I think focusing on the outcomes, and the outcomes being lower emissions, and then engaging the relevant players to best find the path forward to achieving those outcomes are going to get you much faster results at a much lower cost and a much larger scale. And we're demonstrating that today where the policy is right, and we're demonstrating how encumbered businesses can become when the policy is not right.
Minister, does it make a difference when you're looking for a business partner on where they're listed because of
No, we have a criteria of choosing, partners on different criteria. The two gentlemen sitting here, ExxonMobil and Total, are some of the best companies in the world, and other IOCs that participate with us. And we develop our partnership based on trust, on history that we have together. And I think that it has to be a win-win on both sides, and we understand that, and we respect each other, and we're very happy to have this partnership. Where they're listed is their own direction of what they think is best for them.
Darren, are you expecting some of the U.S. energy policy to change if there's a change in administration in the U.S.?
I mean, I think you always have to assume that as administrations come in, they'll review what's happened, previous administration decisions, and then make judgments on those. But frankly, the way we plan for our business, the decisions that we make have time horizons that extend well beyond any single administration. So we tend to focus more on the fundamentals of what's required to grow the business or to address the issues, and then basically lobby for those fundamentals to do what's right and how to achieve the outcome, the best outcomes.
Could there be a change in the IRA?
I think that'll be reviewed, but I think if you look at some of the fundamentals there and the fact that it is focused on an outcome, and if you look at the actions being taken around the states in the U.S., it's a pretty diverse group of states and companies across these states that are contributing in this space. And so I think you've got a mix of political backgrounds in terms of where the IRA is manifesting itself. So I'm not sure it's going to be, such a clear cut.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to the stage, Engineer Badr Mohammed Al-Meer, Group CEO of Qatar Airways, and Yvonne Manzi Makolo, CEO of RwandAir, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Jennifer Zabasaja.
Wonderful. Well, I couldn't think of two better people to talk about this conversation about connecting the Middle East and Africa. And so I'm very fortunate and honored to be sitting next to the two of you. We don't have a lot of time, which is difficult when you're talking about aviation. But let's just start maybe with the most pressing question that many people are thinking about. And that comes with the discussion around the manufacturers, Boeing and Airbus. I know you both have expressed confidence in the manufacturers individually, but I wonder, as executives of an airline, what is it that you want to see from these manufacturers to get production ramped up? Because this is ultimately affecting your bottom line. Badr, maybe you can start?
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity. I think all airlines are facing the same problem currently with the late deliveries of their orders. We're one of the airlines, major airlines, that are really trying our best to assist both Boeing and Airbus and try to find solutions for them to make sure they deliver in accordance with the timelines they're giving us. I know they're under so much pressure when it comes to the supply chain market with their suppliers, but they need to put more pressure on those suppliers to make sure that airlines stop bleeding. The demand in the industry has picked up. It is very high. And unfortunately for passengers, for our customers, we're not able to meet their demand because of the shortage of aircrafts in the market.
Are you worried about that getting worse?
Yeah, of course we're worried about this, because my worry, whenever I get a firm date from a supplier, we expect and we depend on the supplier to meet the deadline. And this is how our commercial people start planning, our fleet resources start planning, our pilots, our cabin crew. And whenever the deadline keeps slipping, this means that all our plans are done was a waste, basically.
So Yvonne, then what are the options if that is true what you're experiencing at RwandAir?
Well, in addition to what Badr said, the situation is even worse for smaller airlines like ours, because we're scrambling for the same aircrafts. There's only a limited supply in the market, and for the smaller players, it becomes a bigger challenge. And in addition to that, not only in terms of the production line of new aircraft, even getting spare parts for the existing aircraft is proving to be a big challenge. We have, whenever you have a technical problem, your aircrafts are on the ground for so much longer than it was before. And again, for smaller airlines, that is a big challenge. So I'm hopeful that the situation is going to be resolved, but it needs a lot more effort needs to go into it. Otherwise, it's going to affect the entire aviation industry.
What do you think, if you can quantify that for us, for an airline like RwandAir? I mean, what would the hit actually look like, potentially?
Well, for RwandAir, as I mentioned, we're a small airline with about 14 aircrafts. So having one aircraft down, even a single aircraft, that disrupts your entire schedule, which impacts our customers, which impacts our bottom line as well. And not having access to additional aircraft, given the fact that airlines have rebounded from COVID, everybody is back to the pre-COVID numbers. There's so much opportunity that we need to tap into right now, and delaying that process is a big challenge. And for African airlines, given the opportunity within the African continent, the underserved market that it is, we need to take advantage of this and really accelerate the growth of airlines in the market.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk about that, accelerating, the growth and the collaboration, because that is something that the two of you have worked closely on, especially with Qatar and RwandAir. I mean, can you talk about where the partnership is, where the deal is, and maybe what's to come in the short term? Because many people have been waiting for this deal to actually close and this partnership to close. Badr?
Okay. You know, we have a very big network in Africa. We fly to more than 30 destinations in Africa. And our model is to cover the whole continent of Africa. However, we need to look at certain areas within the continent. I'll give you an example. Our network in the north part of Africa and west part of Africa is basically growing organically. For example, we fly to 4 cities in Nigeria. We have a very successful partnership with the Royal Air Morocco. When it comes to the eastern part of Africa, we as well grow organically. The only missing elements in this equation and covering the whole of the continent of Africa is Central Africa and the southern part of Africa. When it comes to Central Africa, we couldn't find any better partner or any better location than to create or to build a hub for us and our partners other than Kigali. And this is where we started working with RwandAir, with the government in Kigali to build an airport, an infrastructure that can cater for the requirement of building a hub within the Central of Africa. And with this, RwandAir will help us to connect people from other parts of Africa to Kigali, so we can take them all over the world. The last piece of the equation is Southern Africa. We haven't announced this yet.
Do you want to announce it right now?
We will. Yes, we will announce it now. Yvonne knows about it. We are at the final stage of an equity investment in an airline in the southern part of Africa. This airline will help us, will complement the operation of Kigali as a hub, the operation of RwandAir as the airline that connects west, east, north of Africa to the airline that we are finalizing the investment in the southern part of Africa.
Is it also a state-owned airline? Can you give us some insight?
You will find out.
Badr, this is what But maybe give us some insight into the type of partner you were looking for, because there's very few airlines.
Simple for you. You know, Southern Africa, you're talking about 2-3 airlines only. So pick one of them. And
I mean, maybe I can ask you both if the plan is then to have Kigali potentially rival and Addis Ababa. We were just talking about Addis Ababa. I mean, do you see this potentially being the hub of Africa, to rival something like Addis? What do you think, Yvonne?
Well, Addis is already a huge hub, but I think Kigali will be an alternative regional hub, especially given the geographical position of Rwanda, right in the heart of Africa, which gives us access to all the points, north, south, east, west. So we are very strategically positioned. So it'll be an alternative hub. There's a potential to grow it and to compete with the other regional hubs, but we are starting small and we'll continue growing it because, as I said, the potential in the continent is immense.
Give us a sense of the timeline then, when we could potentially see breaking ground, when flights will begin taking off there. I mean, how far out are we looking?
Well, breaking ground, the construction is already in progress. I believe we're just about to finalize the horizontal works and moving on to the vertical works. We're looking at 2027, 2028 in terms of the airport being operational.
Do the delays that we've been seeing with some of the suppliers and manufacturers potentially impact the success of the airport ultimately, do we think, Badr?
You know, in the industry, and I don't want to put it this way, but the best airline that has proven that they can build the best hub in the industry is Qatar Airways, with having Hamad International Airport. We know there are delays when it comes to suppliers. However, everything has been taken care of. With the suppliers, we have very strong communication with the contractors that are already on the ground, finalizing the infrastructure packages, and we have very close discussion with the contractors who will carry out the superstructure packages, and we're aiming to award the construction package by next month, maximum the month after. We're meeting next week as a steering committee, myself, Yvonne, and our other partners, basically to finalize the construction tender. So inshallah, it will finish by 27, 28.
And you're, of course, you were very involved in the Hamad International Airport, as we were talking about. I mean, how similar to that could we see Kigali? Will there be iterations of what we see here, potentially in Kigali? Can you do that?
Yeah, I believe this was the whole intention of having this partnership between us and Rwanda, is to create a similar hub with the efficiency, with the design, with the way of, with the concept of operation, similar to what we have here in HIA, and reflected in Kigali. And our teams, our operation teams, our construction people who are involved in the airport for more than a decade are the people who are responsible and looking after the airport in Kigali. And they will also be involved during the operation phase, assisting our colleagues and our partners in Rwanda.
When we talk about connecting the Middle East and Africa, Yvonne, you and I were speaking about this. It's important also to connect Africa and to have that intra-Africa trade. I mean, how do you get closer to that? I mean, of course, this is important, but how does this partnership then aid intra-Africa travel?
Well, I guess when we were discussing it, we were talking about the challenges in connecting the African continent. But they're challenges, but they're also opportunities. Africa is a market of 1.4 billion people, 16%, 17% of the global population, but we carry only 2% of global traffic. So that tells you what the potential is. There are a lot of challenges, yes, whether it's the cost of operations, infrastructure challenges, the issue of open skies, skilled resources. All these are challenges, yes, but they're also opportunities for airlines, African airlines and international airlines to tap into this. The key, we really need to see how to make sure that we connect the African countries, which is what RwandAir is really focused on, connecting Rwanda to the rest of the African countries, and then connecting the African continent to the rest of the world. We do that very well with Qatar Airways. We fly to Doha 6 times a week. We tap into we have an extended code share where we tap into over 70 routes within their network. So it's fantastic for us, for a small airline to have almost 90 routes for 14 aircrafts, but thanks to the code share that we have, we're able to extend our network further than we could do it by ourselves. So that really also adds on to the opening up of the African continent through this partnership as well.
Do you think there should be more partnerships then like this on the African continent? Is there room for that? Because there's not a lot of very successful airlines that we're seeing right now on the continent.
No, I think the way to go is through partnerships, whether between African airlines and also African airlines with other international airlines. As I mentioned, it's a huge continent, 54 countries that we need to connect, and no one airline can do that on their own. So the way to go is definitely through partnerships.
What do you want to see then? I mean, why aren't we seeing more?
Well, this is a challenge. There's a lot of protectionism, definitely, which we need to see how to overcome. Because with protectionism, you're protecting a very small piece of the pie, whereas through partnerships you grow that pie, and every player has more. So we need to see how to grow that 2% of global traffic to 10, 15, 20%. And the only way to really do that is really through partnerships.
Badr, I see you nodding there. Do you agree? Is that sort of what you've been assessing?
Yeah. To answer your question, for other airlines to have a similar partnership with international airlines, they need to come up with the same mindset that we've seen in Rwanda with our partners in Kigali. They opened their doors, they welcomed us, we sat on the table, there was no... Yeah, they were not trying to protect their business, not allowing other people to come in. Our intention is to help Kigali, the Rwanda Air and Kigali Airport to go to the next level, and this is what we got from our friends over there.
How does this ultimately, because you've spoken a lot about Qatar 2.0, like this is this is a new era, right, for the airline. I mean, is this a part of that? I mean, how does this factor into your plan?
You know, we've been talking even internally within the company. Everybody talks about Qatar Airways 2.0.
And you started that.
Yeah, I started this. You know, the first part when we started talking about Qatar Airways 2.0, it was basically meant to certain areas. It was about creating a culture of empowerment, a culture of trust within the company, to allow our management, our staff to stand up, give their opinion, try to implement their ideas, and of course, continue to be the best airline in the world, to continue to raise the benchmark, to continue to exceed the expectation of our customers, and to be the employer choice in the industry. This was the first milestone that we have been working on. However, the other areas that are part of Qatar Airways 2.0 is to look at the profitability of the company, to look at the commercial part of the company, to look at our network, how profitable certain routes are, to look at our fleet mix. You know, Qatar Airways has, I'll tell you, 7, 8 different type of aircrafts within the fleet. We are looking now how to reduce the type of aircrafts. I'll give you an example. In Airbus, we have the 320 family, the 330, the 350, the 380. In Boeing, we have the 737 family, the 330, the 787 family, and the 777 family. We used to have the 747, which exited our cargo fleet. So having 8 or 7 different type of aircraft in our fleet mix is putting pressure on us. When it comes to maintenance, to spare parts, to training our pilots, training our cabin crew. So this is part of Qatar Airways 2.0 as well. And this is reflected also in the tender that we have raised in the market few months ago, is basically to reduce the number of the type of aircraft we have in our fleet, to have more consistency in what we're giving our passengers, and to have a better streamline in our operation.
Have you thought then what you would actually cut out in terms of that fleet you just mentioned?
It depends on the answer we get back from both Boeing and Airbus through the tender that we have.
Okay, still.
Yeah, but we will not go from 7 different type of aircrafts to 2 or to 3. Still, and again, this is part of the internal discussion that we have as part of the creating a culture of empowerment and trust. We sit on the table between commercial, technical, flight ops, everybody, and basically plan the strategy of the company for the next 15, 20 years.
Yvonne, is RwandAir also looking to revamp its fleet? And of course, going back to Boeing, of course, with the concern around the safety incidents with certain aircraft. I mean, has that been factored into rethinking the makeup of your fleets, like Badr was just explaining?
Well, we've been in discussions in terms of what the future fleet will look like under the partnership with Qatar Airways. We have, again, for a small airline, we have a very diverse fleet, which we need to rationalize. So we are looking at which ones to remove and which ones to bring into the fleet. So that's a discussion that's still going on internally and with our partners. We should know in the coming months the way forward on that as well.
And I know you've talked about how travel is back to pre-COVID levels, but I wonder, do we see the Middle East conflict potentially getting in the way of that? Do you see travel demand continuing to surge, and especially when it comes to both of your airlines? I mean, what do you think will determine the direction of travel, so to speak? Badr?
You know, our industry has proven it is so resilient. Although the unfortunate conflict in the Middle East, our numbers continue to grow when it comes to passengers, when it comes to other airlines operating in Hamad Airport. We continue. Last year, we closed at an increase of 30% in the number of passengers. This year, so far, from the numbers I saw, for example, this morning, from 1st January till yesterday, we see 27% increase in the number of passengers. the load factor is the highest in any major airline. We see our flights, for example, to the US, it's 95-96% load factor. Our flights to Australia, to India, basically all our network, our load factor is averaging between 85 to 88%, which is very high, which proves that the people want to travel, want to fly.
Does that indicate then there's been no impact, no real significant impact?
No.
To the
From what we see, no.
What about you, Yvonne?
We haven't seen an impact, very similar to what Qatar is experiencing. We are seeing very high demand. Very little difference between our peak season and slack season. Demand has really grown. There's strong desire for people to travel. It really hasn't impacted us. We do have a lot of geopolitical issues as well within the African continent, and even with that, demand still remains strong.
And let's just finish on maybe, what's the next evolution of connecting these two regions? I mean, this is, of course, one partnership, but how do you take it to the next level? What do you think we need to see actually happen in order to continue connecting Africa to the Middle East, but also to the rest of the world, as you both were noting? Yvonne?
Well, on my side, really connecting Africa to not only the Middle East, but to the rest of the world, we need to address all these challenges limiting connectivity within the African continent. We need to address the issue of high costs, whether it's high cost of fuel, airport charges, taxes, the issue of poor infrastructure at some airports, which challenges airlines to fly into some of these airports, the issue of open skies, full implementation of SATM, so that we get rid of these highly restrictive buses, bilateral air service agreements that we have, which restrict starting of new routes. Really upskilling, given the fact that Africa has such a young population. By 2030, I believe Africa will have 42% share of global youth. So the potential is huge. We need to get as many of them within the aviation sector, highly skilled to support this growth, the issue of visas within the African continent. If we can remove a lot of that, then we can connect the countries, the 54 countries, really well, and then connect the 54 countries to the rest of the world.
Is that on the public sector, you think, to start the conversation?
It's on all levels, whether it's on the government level, or private sector level as well. It's the whole ecosystem. We need to work together to resolve these challenges.
Badr, the last word.
As I said in the beginning, Africa is a very important market for us, and we have a plan. The plan starts, of course, with our friends in Rwanda by building a hub and operate it as a hub. And this is our intention. This is first item on our plan. Second item is to build an airline with enough aircrafts in its fleet to be able to connect the rest of Africa. And this is, both items are already in progress. And we want to expand the airline to make sure we don't want to depend on other airlines in the neighboring countries. We will do it with our partners by expanding their fleet to be able to cover other destinations or to strengthen their network in Africa. The next item is basically to see where we feel we can improve our operation and complement and improve the operation of RwandAir and Kigali Airport by investing in other airlines, which is the airline in Southern Africa. So from our end and our partners in Rwanda, we have a plan, we have a strategy to make sure we expand our network in Africa and try to connect as many people in Africa and as many destinations and cities as possible.
When should we expect that announcement? On the Southern Africa airline?
Maybe in 2-3 weeks.
Okay, good to know. Badr, Yvonne, thank you both so much. Thank you to everyone for listening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage His Excellency Riyad Mizur, Minister of Industry and Trade of the Kingdom of Morocco, His Excellency Alfredo E. Pascual, Secretary of Trade and Industry of the Republic of the Philippines, and His Excellency Mehmet Şimşek, Minister of Treasury and Finance of the Republic of Turkey, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Jumana Bersace.
Hello again, everybody. The title of our panel is Creating Competitive Economies, and I found myself asking the question, what exactly is a competitive economy? So I looked up the definition on the World Economic Forum page, and what they have said is competitiveness is the set of institutions, policies, and factors that determine the level of productivity of a country. And of course, a competitive economy is a productive one. A productive one generates growth. Higher growth leads to higher income levels and ultimately to better living standards. So we're going to talk about the pathway to get there on this panel today. Your Excellency, I'd like to start with you. Inflation in Turkey is running close to 70%, which in itself creates a whole bunch of obstacles in terms of creating this competitive economy. Yesterday on our central banking panel, I had the opportunity to speak to Dr. Fatih, the central bank governor, and he said to me that the central bank are going to do whatever it takes to get inflation back under control again. My question is whether the government is also going to do whatever it takes to bring inflation back in line. And this with the view of course, you did release several spending measures earlier this week. Some people in the market feel that the fiscal consolidation could have gone further.
Well, thank you. Yes, the government will do what it takes because our number one policy priority is attaining price stability. Unfortunately, we have high inflation, but now we have a credible, robust program to bring it down. Monetary policy course correction, which you have discussed yesterday, is largely done. Now it's our turn. Government's role here is first, we're going to tighten fiscal policy to support disinflation. Incomes policies are going to be more supportive. But the key is structural reforms. Through structural reforms, we hope to boost productivity and enhance competitiveness. Of course, it includes green transition, the usual twin transformation, but also, upskilling, reskilling, public finance reform, so across the board, labor market flexibility. So yes, central bank is doing a great job, and now, it's high time that we provide additional support, and that's why this week, we unveiled a package of fiscal discipline, fiscal cuts. We're going to reorient investments into more productive areas. That's key. But also we're going to cut certain spending to create more fiscal room. But also tightening fiscal stance is going to help disinflate. So it's a combination of all. To summarize, we have sound policies and a structural transformation narrative. And both combined, hopefully, will help regain investor confidence, have a big impact on portfolio preferences, and we're almost there.
Disinflation generally comes at the cost of growth, and President Erdogan has pursued a very pro-growth strategy policy. What level of tolerance do you think there would be for a hard landing or a recession?
In the long run, there are no trade-offs between growth and disinflation. In fact, disinflation or low inflation is absolutely essential for sustainable high growth. We know that. But in the short term, some trade-offs may emerge. I think those trade-offs are worth living by. So my sense is there will be tolerance to some moderation in domestic demand. So we're rebalancing growth. We're changing the composition of growth. What we are pursuing is sustainable high growth, not boom and bust episodes. And that's really where price stability comes in. It's absolutely at the core of this program, and we are committed, we'll deliver, because it's very difficult to operate in high inflationary environment. Very difficult to attract FDI inflows. So the path to competitiveness is through higher productivity, of course, but that requires sound policies, and price stability is the core of that.
Yeah. Thank you. Minister, I would like to turn to the Philippines. The GDP numbers came in last week showing that the economy grew 5.7% year on year. Last year, also very strong expansion, one of the strongest in the Southeast Asia region. Let me just ask you how you see the outlook for the rest of this year, and then also what other measures the government has been undertaking. We talk about structural reforms, we talk about infrastructure development, how all of that is going to contribute to the process as well.
Yeah, we're very happy about the performance of the economy from 5.6% last year to the first quarter this year of 5.7%, among the highest in Southeast Asia. And we're making sure that we have the policy environment that will sustain growth. We're continuing our Build Better More program. We have 185 flagship infrastructure projects, totaling cost of upwards of $160 billion. And this is being pursued, supported by the launch of our Maharlika Investment Fund, our first sovereign wealth fund that will pool the money to support infrastructure, but also not government by itself all the time, mainly through partnerships with the private sector, through PPPs. And in that regard, we have recently passed the first public-private partnership code that has made clear and predictable policy environment for the private sector participants in our infrastructure projects. You know, the infrastructure projects are meant to improve the physical connectivity. You know, we're a series of many islands, you know, and physical connectivity is always a challenge, and we tend to have a higher logistics cost because of the multimodal way of transporting goods and people. But we're addressing that through projects like our Central Luzon, that's the main island, Luzon, the Central Luzon Economic Corridor. We will build railways to interconnect a port in somewhere in the north to Clark in the middle, down to Manila, and then down to Batangas. And that will improve within Luzon the connectivity, physical connectivity. Now, cyber connectivity is critical given the digital technology era we're in, and that's also going on very rapidly. Now, we're facilitating this by way of policy reforms that we are implementing, like, for example, the opening of several sectors to 100% foreign ownership, like in telecommunications, utilities, airports, tollways, etc. This policy environment will make it easier for foreign investors to decide to come in if they want full control of the project.
Yeah.
And there are new laws that are being done. We're revising a recovery law that was passed during the pandemic, and we're addressing some of the weaknesses of the lawmaking or clarifying certain provisions to avoid the weaknesses that we observe during the implementation of the law. Of course, our friend from Turkey talked about upskilling of our workers. That's what is happening full scale and with intensive support from the government.
Yeah.
But with the participation of private sector as well, not just Philippine private sector, but also our partners from abroad, providing upskilling programs for our workers.
Well, we're going to talk in a short while about some of the trade agreements also. You speak about your partnerships, so we'll get there. Before we do, I do want to speak to the minister as well. I was in Morocco 1 month after the horrific earthquake that struck for the IMF meetings. And when you think of Morocco, the country has faced many challenges over the last year, be they commodities, climate-related, the earthquake, obviously. But Morocco has been quite resilient. So talk us through how the economy has managed to be so resilient and how you think this resilience is going to serve you well in terms of creating a competitive economy.
Thank you for this question, very important question. 3-4 factors to resume that. Great vision. We have strategy designed by our king, 20 years, and we're working on these strategies. Second is stability is a key pillar of this strategy. That means we do it the hard way. We choose always the hard way. We maintained an inflation rate below 2% during 20 years. During the explosion of the prices after the Ukraine war, we maintained inflation below 7%, 6.6%. So we're doing it the hard way. Third is that we choose our battles. And we choose our strategy, targeted strategy, in manufacturing, in tourism, in energy. And we didn't have any other choice than to make the energy transition pathway because we don't have hydrocarbon available in Morocco. So results of that is having an economy that has margin to absorb some crisis because you're doing it the hard way. The result of that is that you continue to make progress, even if you have a severe drought, earthquake, etc. The result of that is that after 15 or 18 years of deploying this strategy, we're observing a Moroccan miracle. That means today we can proudly say that 85% of our exports, 85% of our export, of the value of our export, are manufactured products. You can see developed countries or industrial countries, as we call them, that cannot reach this level. We can proudly say that we have the best and the most competitive platform in producing cars in the world. It means now, with the figures, transformation costs are similar to countries like India or China. So now we are in a path where we build this competitiveness based on cost and on quality, and we are trying to reach the next level to move from a low-cost country to a best-cost country. This is reached. And the next level is to move from a best-cost country to a best-solution country.
Quick question for you, Minister, just as a follow-up. It is the year of the culture for Morocco, Qatar, and obviously we are here in Qatar. So just an answer on how you think this is going to serve your both respective economies.
Well, first of all, Qatar is not a closest friend, but a brother of Morocco. And during the earthquake, Qatari teams were first to support us, and thank you for that. We're very proud of that, and we are very happy. And thank you for your solidarity, because most of you were in Morocco 3 weeks after the earthquake to support us during this period. And we're very proud to have been able to host you after this trauma. And we are proud also that the 2024 is the year of Qatar and Morocco cultural to celebrate common culture together in Marrakesh, and you are all invited to be there. It's going to be a beautiful event.
Well, when we think about creating competitive economies, there's often a wedge between the perception internally and externally. And you tweeted not so long ago just that in the last month, there's been a lot of foreigner interest in Turkey. Reserves have increased by $30 billion. This is a tweet that you put up. Do you feel like there's a difference in understanding in what you're trying to achieve between how the external community view it versus internally? Because internally, there's still a fear about where inflation is headed. Inflation expectations, if you look at some of the recent surveys, are still quite high.
Well, it depends. It depends who. I mean, let's put it this way: when we refer to external actors. Usually they are sophisticated global financial institutions or think tanks, etc. If you're talking about domestic population, it's easy to extrapolate the trends of recent past into the future. So when you look at current inflation, for example, it refers to past 12 months. But over the past several months, we've done a major course correction in monetary policy. And now we have a monetary policy stance that is sufficiently tight enough to anchor inflation expectations. But that's not reflected in the past numbers. So when you ask local economists in terms of their inflation expectations for the next 12 months, they already see it going down from around 70% to mid-30s. It's somewhat higher than what we are targeting, but it takes time to have the convergence between your targets based on your program versus the expectations. The best way is to deliver. And this summer, there's going to be very strong delivery. Last year, we focused on fiscal consolidation. We delivered front-loaded fiscal adjustment. Debt to GDP ratio is only 29.5%. Structural reforms, we're not pushing through aggressively. Now it's time to deliver on disinflation front. And once the numbers begin to emerge, meaning once the year-on-year inflation begins to come down, I'm absolutely convinced that domestic population and local actors in terms of business people and others will come around. It takes time.
Yeah.
There's a bit of inertia in services. It's understandable. But delivery is going to be key.
Will this normalization of the Turkish economy mean that you will start easing some of the restrictions on capital mobility?
We've eased those significantly, the so-called macroprudential measures. We've already unwinded most of them. We're simplifying. Well-functioning markets is key to competitiveness and productivity. And that's what exactly we're doing. This is a sizable economy. Remember, it's over $1.1 trillion, and it's still growing pretty fast. The 20-year average real GDP growth has been close to 5.5%. So it's a sizable economy. It's growing. We've had a period where policy choices created some issues, challenges. That's largely behind us. So we are going through a sustained period of simplification and unwinding some of those macro so-called prudential measures.
Minister, I'd like to turn to trade and ask you how you see the outlook for trade, particularly in Southeast Asia, proximity to China, and also the fact that you have a very close trading relationship with China, but recently you've started to strengthen your relationship with the US as well. Do you feel like you're caught between the crosswinds of this Cold War, so to speak, between the US and China?
Well, we have maintained the policy as initiated by President Marcos in his State of the Nation address last year, that we are friends to all, enemy to none. And in that sense, we are balancing our relationship with all the partners that we have. With the US, we have intensified our engagement. Early this year, there was a trilateral meeting between the US, Japan, and the Philippines, where we talked about economic matters. And this May 21st, we're going to hold the Indo-Pacific Economic Forum in Manila with in partnership with the US. So we're pursuing that. And we have concluded the agreement of the US-led Indo-Pacific Economic Forum, the three pillars of supply chain, clean energy, and fair economy. So that's our relationship with the US. With China, we continue to see China as our largest and foremost trading partner. It's number one. US just the third in terms of trade volume. And we continue that. And our engagement with China is through the RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which we are implementing with full commitment. And also the ASEAN-China FTA.
Yeah.
With the EU, we hope to broaden our relationship with the start of the negotiation for a free trade agreement between the Philippines and the EU. So we are balancing, our relationship with these three major blocs, plus Japan, of course, also a major partner, and hope to be able to grow our economy on the basis of growing trade partnership with these trading blocs.
Well, Minister, I could put the same question to you, because Morocco is the only African country with a free trade agreement with both the US and the EU recently.
And Turkey.
African. That's why I said African. Attention to
we have
detail.
a free trade
We have a free trade agreement.
With Turkey, yeah. And Turkey. But you've also announced some Chinese industrial investments recently as well. So you've got these three competing superpowers, the US economic blocs, US, EU, and China. How do you navigate the relationship with the three in terms of your stated objective of doubling your GDP by 2035? How does it contribute?
So the idea is clear and simple. We have three objectives, three main objectives. Create jobs, create sustainable jobs, and create good jobs. So it's all about jobs. We are a country in demographic transitions with a bunch of young people coming everywhere, more talented every year, that need to have a better future. And this is our job. And we will take every single opportunity to make it happen. Based on that, we try to read the landscape. The landscape is clear. We're having blocks, 3, 4, 5, 10, 12, whatever, competing against each other or complementing each other, sometimes having, in a VUCA word, with complexity, uncertainty, ambiguity, and it's changing every time, changing the rules. And we try to navigate based on this priority. First of all, I see my customers. My customers are mainly in Europe. So these are my main trading partner, and I try to comply with what it takes to be able to sell my products there, to be clear. Second, I need investments. Investments are coming from everywhere in the world, from Turkey, from Europe, from the US, and now from China. And to see this investment and this product that we will produce, will they comply with some regulations, mainly US regulation, foreign entity of concern, or whatever it takes, or IRA, or other regulations that are coming in Europe, etc. So we navigate based on what we read in the accessibility of the products we were trying to develop in Morocco so that we can be able to create jobs. So it's easy. It's complex every day because we have this uncertainty and this ambiguity in the rules that are changing every time. But we're doing our best. And at the end of the day, there are most of all private investments. So we need to convince private investors to take the risk based on this uncertainty.
Well, that is exactly how much time we have for this panel. Your Excellencies, thank you so much for keeping to time and answering all of my questions. That was wonderful.
Thank you, Jumana.
Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage General David H. Petraeus, partner and chairman of KKR Global Institute, for a conversation with Bloomberg's John Micklethwaite.
General, thank you for coming back to talk to us again. There's not much happening in the world of geopolitics and risks.
Quiet these days.
Just a quiet, everyday thing. So shall we begin with the obvious one, which is Israel and Gaza, which you know and understand. There was a very good article which used a lot from you on this idea that when it comes to going through Gaza, this is a very kind of military strategy idea, but when you deal with an insurgency, you need to clear, to hold, to build. And that seems to be the area where Israel is not doing this correctly, just purely from a military point of view.
Yeah, and even the Israeli Defense Force Chief of Staff reportedly in private was expressing his concerns about the lack of essentially the desired end state, something the military always wants to know. Yes. What is it you want us to achieve, Mr. President or Mr. Prime Minister? And we learned this the hard way in Iraq. The first several years we did clear and leave, or clear and hand off. And it didn't work, especially in 2006 when the cycle of violence of Sunni Shia plunged the country into an actual civil war. During that year, you know, I had two-star, three-star, four-star commands in Iraq. That was the one where I was back in the United States. We did the counterinsurgency field manual. We overhauled every aspect of preparation of our forces and leaders and equipment for deployment to Iraq. And when we went in for the surge, when the violence was at an all-time high, it was a very, very dire situation. It truly was a Sunni Shia civil war in many parts of the country. We completely reversed what we've been doing. You know, people talk about change management. You can't change any more than completely reversing. And I often would say that the surge that mattered most was not the additional 25 or 30,000 U.S. forces, as useful as those were in accelerating the implementation of the new big ideas. The surge that mattered most was the surge of ideas. And it was essentially that we're not just going to clear and leave or clear and hand off to the Iraqis who are no longer combat effective in many places. We're going to clear and hold. And you keep the people separate from, in this case, Al-Qaeda, and then you rebuild it right away. We would commit before we went into Fallujah, by the way, the third time. We hadn't worked the previous two, or Ramadi, or Bakuba, or Mosul, or parts of Baghdad. We would tell the people in advance, we are going to make your lives better by getting Al-Qaeda out of your lives, and we will secure you from them. And we literally created what we called gated communities. In fact, I went to the sheikhs in Fallujah, and I said, you know, people pay a lot of money to have a gated community in Florida. We're going to give it to you free here in Fallujah. We had 12 of them. And then you have entry control points, you have biometric ID cards, you have all these tactics, techniques, and procedures to keep Al-Qaeda out of the neighborhoods after having literally gone through every single house, floor, room, and in the case of Israel, tunnel. Now, let me note that Israel, the situation they face is more difficult than Fallujah, Ramadi, and Bakuba all put together because of the 350 miles of subterranean infrastructure that they have. It makes it very, very difficult because of the density of the population, the high rises, not small buildings, and so on. But the principle is still the same. You have to clear and hold and keep the enemy out of the people. And I do believe, by the way, that Hamas is the equivalent of the Islamic State. This is an irreconcilable extremist group that I believe does need to be destroyed. But how you do that matters a great deal. And I would welcome seeing a commitment that we are going to make your lives better, civilians in Gaza. The way we're going to do that is we're going to clear the enemy out of your neighborhoods. We're then going to seal off those neighborhoods and give you biometric ID cards. We're going to flood them full of humanitarian assistance. We're going to restore basic services, and we're going to aggressively rebuild all the damage that has been done in the course of this particular war. But the latter two elements of this are lacking. And so they have had to go back into Al-Shifa Hospital, which I felt they should have held on to in the first place and turned it into a great medical center to take care of the people.
That was it. So northern Gaza would be an exact example of where they could have been.
Exactly. I've had conversations with members of the War Cabinet, and I've suggested, for example, just wall off the upper third, just to start there. Have 3 entry control points, get biometric ID cards, clear that north really carefully, and then keep Hamas out of that area. And again, flood it with humanitarian assistance, restoration of basic services, and all the rest of that, and then show the people what it could be like. Again, they're not going to embrace the Israeli Defense Forces, but at least they shouldn't be actively opposed to them. But without that hold and then build phase and a public commitment to make life better for them and to ensure that Hamas not only will be ineffective as a combat force, but cannot reconstitute. The military definition of destroy means to render the enemy incapable of accomplishing his mission without reconstitution. You have to focus on that without reconstitution. And during the surge in Iraq, and really for the 3.5 subsequent years, we drove violence down by nearly 90% during the surge, and then it continued to go down farther even as we were withdrawing, which showed the validity, if you will, of what it was that we were pursuing. And that, I believe, is what the model should be in this case. But as I noted, even the Israeli Defense Force Chief of Staff has pretty serious reservations about the lack of these latter components and what is the future? What do they envision? You know, it'd be ideal if there was a Palestinian government in a box that could come over from the West Bank and immediately take over. That just is not in the cards. It does not appear that there is a force in the region that is willing to go in until it has been stabilized and secured. This is very resource intensive. It's very challenging. We don't, I think foolishly in a way, don't want them to administer it, but I don't see an alternative, and I have done this for a living in two different wars.
Do you worry that behind this, and listening to you talk, is that there's a fundamental problem from the Israeli side, perhaps going all the way to Netanyahu, whereby they are unable to think of the civilian population in Gaza?
There is an issue here, and obviously the fact that there are groups that are preventing the humanitarian assistance from going into Gaza, literally ambushing trucks, gives, again, a degree of that. So I do think we have to understand the nature of the trauma, the magnitude of the trauma. I've been in Israel just, I think it was a month or so ago, spent a week there. I talked to, again, a member of the War Cabinet fairly regularly. To put this in perspective, remember the United States lost not quite 3,000 in the 9/11 attacks. The equivalent of this for the U.S. would be 42,000 lost and another 7,000 taken hostage. You can only imagine what our reaction would have been in that case. So there is a traumatic event here, the worst in their history, and it creates challenges to distinguish between the civilians and Hamas. And yet that distinction has to be made. If you can't make that fundamental distinction, you can't arrive at the conclusion that I've discussed with you.
It seems odd to me that America, as you pointed out, they went through 9/11, and then we had these wars, which you had to tidy up some parts of it because of that, I suppose, that sense that America felt aggrieved and angry and then wanted to deal with things.
Very much so, yeah.
When you talk to the Israelis, do they feel that at all as being coming from someone who's been through an experience somewhat similar to that?
I think this is not monolithic.
Yeah.
There are degrees of again, the sentiment and so forth. The challenge, of course, is that the ruling coalition is really anchored on the right side. Keep in mind that Bibi Netanyahu in the past has always been, he'd be on the right side of a coalition, not on the left side. And he could always say, I'd really like to do what you'd like me to do, but my left-wing members of this coalition, or the left, or further left of him at least, they won't let me do that. In this case, he's on the left side of the coalition, and of course it's the ultra right-wingers that are causing challenges in that regard in particular.
You said at the beginning that this big thing about no plan for the end. Do you think that's fair, that Israel has no idea what to do once it has done the destroy bit? And obviously you brought up the issue that the way they're doing the destroy bit makes it impossible to destroy them. But anyway, despite that if you were a military commander...
I don't see a midterm plan. That's even, again, you can have branches and sequels. You should have options. And actually, those exist. There's a lot of work going on by U.S. policymakers and others that are trying to come to grips with this, including folks here who are working that, other of the Gulf states, Egypt and others. So there's a lot of work going on, all of which represent options. But if you don't have the midterm, I don't know how you get to the options, because nobody wants to take over a territory that is essentially ruled by thugs right now. It's gang members and remnants of Gaza, or of Hamas. And in fact, again, the proof of what I'm saying is that not only did they have to go back into Al-Shifa, because there were hundreds had reconstituted, now they're back into northern Gaza again, which was the first focus. And lo and behold, they've discovered that there's reconstitution taking place there as well. So if you don't keep the enemy from reconstituting, if you don't keep the enemy from getting back into the population, this is going to happen endlessly. Now, you're going to grind them down because they have hermetically sealed the Gaza Strip, including now the crossing at Rafah with Egypt, of course. So they control everything that goes in, unlike in the past. But that still is an exceedingly messy situation. And again, there's an obligation to civilians that goes along with the laws of land warfare.
Do you think that if you were the general in charge of the Israeli side, what you're basically saying, it's impossible without some kind of clear goal at the end to know what you're driving towards?
Well, again, I'd like to have a range of options toward the end. But again, you need a midterm. I think that's the challenge right now, because again, if you aren't clearing and holding, you're just going to endlessly clear and re-clear and re-clear. Again, you're driving it down, but think of the lot and life of the people during that time who are in really a very desperate situation and an enormous amount of damage and destruction.
Just one last thing on that. Do you still see the final end of this being a two-state solution of some sort?
I think it has to be. Again, no one has ever been able to describe any other possible solution, but obviously that has been exceedingly challenging, and not just because of the situation and the politics in Jerusalem. It's also what goes on in Ramallah. Keep in mind that they walked away from both Ehuds, Omer and
is there any Palestinian leader you could see who would be able of uniting the Palestinians? Some people talk about Marwan Barghouti, the guy who's in jail. You look at other.
I think he polls the highest. Yes. I think actually, and then there's the former prime minister who was so impressive back in fact, when I was I think Central Command NCI director, when we would go to Ramallah. There are individuals there, whether they can work this navigate this very difficult political milieu to get to the top, I think is in question.
One last thing, I meant to ask this before. You've watched US and Israel for a very long time within it. This is about as bad as it gets, isn't it?
Oh, no, I think I've seen
worse.
I think I have seen worse, yeah. Good, the commitment's still there. President just approved another $1 billion worth of arms and ammunition. They're trying to influence, which I don't think is entirely wrong-headed. I don't necessarily agree with some of I do think, again, Hamas, an Islamist extremist group that is irreconcilable, has to be destroyed. You can't stop short of that. My old friend Benny Gantz, the former chief of staff of the IDF and also Minister of Defense, I thought put it right when he said you don't send the fire department to extinguish 80% of the blaze. You have to put it all out. The problem is they're putting it all out and then it's springing back up again because they're not keeping an eye and pressure on. Look, we learned this the hard way. Actually, Iraq learned this the hard way, because when we withdrew our final combat forces 3.5 or 5 years after the start of the surge, and the situation was quite good and their forces were quite solid, they took their eye off the Islamic State because they got preoccupied with demonstrations by the Sunnis that were brought about by needlessly sectarian policies of the prime minister. And that caused a lot of turmoil. Meanwhile, the Islamic State was able to get themselves back up off the ground, dust themselves off, go into the Syrian civil war, and eventually you have the first ever Islamist extremist caliphate anchored on Mosul and Raqqa. So you don't want that to happen.
I think we've spread enough optimism about the Middle East. We should now move on to Ukraine.
One of the interesting dynamics here, keep in mind, of course, I'm chairman of the KKR Global Institute, and what we look at is geopolitics and geoeconomics. Despite all the turmoil, there's been relatively little effect on the global economy, and it's quite simply because the flow of crude, natural gas, and distillates has been largely unimpeded from the Gulf. And Iran wants to continue to be able to export its 1.5 million barrels per day of oil and distillates. And we don't want to impose, because we don't want to see the price of gasoline go up at the pump and inflect inflation in an election year. Yes. So the impact on the economy has been relatively modest. It's not if you're in Egypt's shoes and you lose 60% of the revenue through the Suez Canal, but the market long since priced in extra 10 to 14 days for that 60% of the traffic that otherwise would go there.
All the same, can we move on to Ukraine, which also has energy connotations? I suppose the basic question is, how bad is it at the moment? The Russians have pushed in.
Yeah. Don't you have this wonderful British term, fraught?
Yes.
I think this is a pretty fraught situation. This is a dangerous period because of the delay. There are two major factors here. First was the delay in the House of Representatives for nearly 6 months to approve the U.S. assistance. So the U.S. pipeline, which is the biggest and most important, ran dry. And it still isn't refilled. And it'll take probably 3-4 more weeks before you actually see the artillery rounds actually at the guns, or the additional air interceptors and air defense systems and so forth actually in place. And they've got to get through that. And there's a real threat right now to Kharkiv, the second largest city, which is sort of in the east. But from the north of Kharkiv, the Russians have been pushing in. And if they get to artillery range of Kharkiv, they're just going, the Russians will just obliterate that city. They have no qualms anymore.
What is artillery range, just to give a
Well,
rough...
you just, again, 20-ish kilometers, but keep in mind the guns are a little bit behind the lines. It depends what caliber they are, 122 or 152 and so forth. But again, they're approaching that. They may be 10, 15 kilometers from that position. I think the Ukrainians certainly can keep them out of Kharkiv, but at some point they're going to have to push them back, as they did before in the first year of the war. They have to get them out of artillery. It's bad enough that the Russians are now using something called glide bombs, which they can loft 40 kilometers in Russian airspace, where our systems aren't reportedly being used. And they just glide them right to the, and they are very substantial in size, and they're just, again, obliterating what they hit. So that's very, very worrisome. It's also worrisome in the front lines in the Donbass, where they're using these quite a bit as well. But this is a difficult moment. It's also difficult, though, because Ukraine took a long time to sort out its conscription law.
Yeah.
Unlike in the two wars that I was privileged to command, the average age of a soldier on the front line is roughly 19 to 22. In Ukraine, it's over 40. Yeah. Because the conscription law is very different. They believe that young men should have a chance to get an education, get married, have a family, and it used to be the age of 27 was the first time they actually get conscripted. They've now reduced that to 25, but after a very emotional debate, not unlike that in our House of Representatives, and then they closed a bunch of other loopholes and other issues that they have resolved. But they've now got to start regenerating forces. And of course, despite the extraordinary leadership in Ukraine, despite the morale, the sense that they're fighting their war of independence, the innovation, they're producing tens of thousands of drones every month and iterating very rapidly. All of this, despite all of that, the objective reality here is that they are fighting for their survival against a country that has more than 3 times the population and more than 10 times the economy and is seemingly unconcerned by casualties. And that's a difficult situation.
What do you think Putin's strategy is? I mean, talking to the Polish president yesterday, it's attrition, and but is it also waiting for Donald Trump?
It could be. Again, it's not just waiting for Donald Trump. We just had a 6-month delay in the House of Representatives under Joe Biden. Of course, it's controlled by the other party. So the dynamics, they're just hoping whatever dynamics there are. By the way, the Europeans rock solid. As we were talking earlier, at Munich this year, the security conference, it was the opposite of what it normally was. Normally, the U.S. is there and they're beating up on the Europeans for being feckless and not spending 2% of GDP on defense and everything else. And this year was the complete opposite. Europeans, robust. They committed $50 billion at the EU level aggregate. Each individual country is going in doing bilateral security agreements and so forth, and it was the U.S. that hadn't met what clearly was its obligation. Now we have, and $61 billion is a huge amount of money. It's 20 billion, almost 20 billion more than we've provided in the first 2 years. So that'll carry this for quite a while. But there's a number of factors in here that will determine going forward, including the election in the U.S., including actually the EU election that's coming up, see what that does. Yes. Individual countries in the EU that are less than perfect partners, shall we say, for NATO and support for Ukraine, et cetera.
As you said, you do geoeconomics and all those things, but the other thing which is happening behind these, and we focused, I think, particularly for this audience, is interesting, all your experience in both Ukraine and Gaza, but behind it, Xi and Putin are meeting. Yeah. There is this basic issue that Russia is where it is in part because China is supporting it. What should America be doing about that?
Well, getting more serious about it. I think we have. In the meetings when Secretary Blinken was in there was no question about that. That was laid out on the table. But clearly this has built up. The sanctions evasion that's ongoing in general is very problematic. And the U.S. Treasury Department and others are trying to come to grips with this. Because clearly the components, the supply chain, this is not weapon systems from China or anything like that, but clearly it is the elements that are required for the Russian military-industrial complex to get going again, because they did suffer in that first year. They were, you know, the Ukrainians have taken out half of the entire Russian tank fleet at this point in time, and those are hard to replace. But they're able to keep up with the missiles, the Iranian-provided drones, 1 million rounds of North Korean ammunition. So it's really those 4 countries, and then a number of others on the periphery of Russia who are all of a sudden, you know, buying 5 times as many iPhones and other devices as they used to, all of which can be useful for that military-industrial complex.
You've always been somebody who's, as well as military, hearts and minds has always been something you've really thought about. You look around the world at the moment, you talk to people here. If you go to Africa, you go around the Middle East, you go around student campuses, all these different areas, people like you, who many of us who made the case for Ukraine, how much is what is happening in Gaza giving people, Chinese and the Russians on the one hand, on the other hand, people who just don't like America, the chance to say, look, America has double standards. It doesn't, it calls about liberty, freedom, human rights in one sense, and then it keeps absolutely quiet on other ones.
Yeah, I'm not sure I totally buy that. I mean, obviously, there can be criticism in a variety of different ways. There is, without question. I've been the subject of some of it over the years, and you get a little bit thicker skin about that. At the end of the day, I still unabashedly believe in the United States, the principles, values, and so forth that we have held dear over the centuries, even as parties have changed and leaders have changed and all the rest of that. It's still the location in which we're investing. I am, after all, a partner in one of the world's largest investment firms, whereas destination number 1, it's right there. And it's because there's still a very, very interesting secret sauce about the United States of America. By the way, the energy, why did the energy revolution happen in the United States? Because we invented the technology of deep directional drilling, seismic big data, and hydraulic fracturing. We have agile capital markets. We have wildcatters that could build this out. We have reasonable infrastructure to push it around, and of course, yes, we have water near the deposits. But that you see that in many different aspects. You see it in the innovation sector. You certainly see it being exported to a degree, which is great, especially, by the way, out here. There's a fantastic article today in the Times of the Post that lays out how Silicon Valley has been embracing the Gulf states. And it's because there's something special here as well.
Very quickly, as a last question, I don't think it's a question of people in any way disrespecting America's economic might, but from the point of view of rallying political support at the moment to America, what is happening in Gaza, is that making it more difficult?
Certainly, in some aspects, I think that's probably true. And again, the administration, I think, has been seeking to influence, because again, as I said, it's not just the destruction of Hamas, it's how you do that that matters. And I think the administration sees that. They're trying to influence it. It's difficult. We don't fully appreciate the trauma that Israel has experienced and so forth. We don't experience, I don't think, sufficiently the efforts to which they go to try to minimize civilian loss of life with leaflets, text messages, bullhorns, you name it. But at the end of the day, a tiny little area with nearly 2 million people being pushed around in it, that's a very, very difficult setting for this kind of operation. And again, as I said, the most fiendishly difficult urban operation since World War II.
General Petraeus, once again, it's a delight to be here. We could have talked for much longer, but we've sadly run out of time. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks, John.
Networking lunch. Feel free to go to the breakout sessions happening soon at the Fairmont Hotel. We will see you all back here again at 1:30 p.m.